Tomorrow, President Cyril Ramaphosa will launch the inaugural Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium of South Africa. The launch comes weeks after consultations between government and its stakeholders to propel the country's post-COVID economic recovery plan. The idea is to use investment in infrastructure to transform the economy and contribute to employment. A number of infrastructure projects have been identified in the land, water and digital sectors. Over 60 funding institutions, including development banks, development financial institutions and the commercial banking sector will fund the projects. To give us more detail on the revised infrastructure investment plan, I'm joined now via Skype by Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, Head of the Investment and Infrastructure in the Presidency. A very good morning to you and thank you for your time this morning. Of course, there has been a lot of talk around the economy. We've heard the experts and the President and government officials speaking about how we need a new economy during this unprecedented time to steer the country forward. Talk us through the idea behind this symposium.
Good morning and good morning to the viewers. Thank you very much for the invitation. So essentially it's about stimulating aggregate demand, and depending on the sectors that you have prioritized, you are going to impose localization requirements, and on the back of that you'll be able to industrialize and therefore absorb the supply side. So essentially address the unemployment question. So it's a conversation that started late December last year with President Ramaphosa. And I think even at the time there was a great appreciation that the economy is confronted with the significant adverse headwinds, that the fiscal headspace was beginning to diminish and diminish rapidly. And we know now with the downgrade to sub-investment grade and also COVID that essentially the fiscal headspace has been decimated. So there's a need for government to ensure that we work together with the private sector to get project to bankability. And essentially talking about those projects that they've got the cost recovery component. And we have identified the network industries, water, energy, transportation, ICT infrastructure, because of their multiply effect, the ability to introduce greater levels of efficiency in the economy, and also to just absorb the supply side. We also added agriculture and human settlement. So we've been working with the private sector, helping us bringing capacity with regards to technical and financial engineering. And now we've got into a point where we've packaged a range of projects. We have taken them to market as part of market sounding sessions, what we call pitching sessions on the 28th and 29th of May. And now we're at a point where the commitments, firm commitments are to be made. And then on the back of that, and together with many other interventions, we hope to lift the economy and also focusing on transformation, ownership and production patterns, ensuring that there's some degree of manufacturing and industrialization in the township villages and rural areas. So essentially this is part of the totality of the interventions to ensure that we reset the economy.
As you speak to the different sectors, a question on my mind is who will fund these projects? And as we look at the various sectors that you've spoken about digital and water and land, how confident are you that these are indeed the sectors to eye when it comes to moving the country's economy forward?
Well, we are more than confident. I think there's multiple examples in economic literature that suggest that network industries are the areas to invest in. We know that there's a big problem of water in the country, the collapse of water infrastructure, wastewater treatment works, water treatment plants. And we know that we have about 780,000 kilometers of roads. 80% of that is still gravel. And the majority of the unsurfaced roads is in the rural areas. We know that COVID has exposed some of the acute asymmetries in relation to provision of broadband. There are kids who are from affluent areas were able to do online schooling. Others from very poor areas were not being able to learn. And that really increases, if you like, the inequality that exists in that space. But the novelty of this intervention is such that we've been working for the past 5 months with the private sector. So these projects have been prepared through the lenses of private sector. They have an appreciation of what investors are looking for. So we're more than confident. I mean, when we went to the pitching sessions on the 28th and 29th, We've got firm commitments with regards to interest in specific projects, and those will be unveiled by President Ramaphosa when we meet tomorrow. So we are very buoyant, confident about the journey that we are traveling. Yes, it's not enough, but I think it constitutes a start, and we are more than confident that we'll get this right. And we are also investing in the capacity for project preparation and packaging, both at the national, provincial, and local government level. There's some degree of alignment. There's symmetry in how we want to do this. Cabinet has approved a project pipeline, has also approved the creation of a single body of entry with regards to all projects in the country. So there's going to be aggregation benefits. We are going to benefit from concentration of skills, and in this way we think that we will be able to restart the economy, if you like.
As we talk rands and cents, how much of a budget are you looking to work with here?
Yes, like I've indicated, we are not looking to get money from the fiscal, so these are private sector sponsored projects, the majority of them. Some of them is public infrastructure, but they've got the costing recovery component, if you like, a revenue stream. The pipeline that went to Cabinet with regards to private sector participation, at the time we were sitting at 122 billion rands. At this stage, with the pitching exercises, I think we have surpassed over 60 billion rands, and we are confident that the number will continue to increase. So we are more than confident about the firm commitments. But with regards to what the pipeline promises, it's over 2 trillion rands, but not necessarily doesn't follow that all projects are at the bankable stage. Some of them are pre-feasibility, some of them, a few are still at conceptual stage. So those ones will come on stream much later. But the ones that are shovel ready, that we are more than confident that can start the, if you like, the resuscitation of the economy are significant, and they runs into tens of billions of rands. And that absolute number will be announced by the President tomorrow. But I can assure you that is something that is going to lift the mood and ensure that they will resuscitate a decimated construction industry, getting people into employment, and we are going to ensure that we engineer a new mood in relation to the economy.
And very lastly, before we let you go, just talk us through the selection process. I hear you briefly touching on a pitching process. Exactly what did it entail when it comes to picking those different sectors and the projects?
So we had over 272 projects across those 6 sectors that I've mentioned. So out of those, 92 of them were, if you like, close to financial close. When I say financial close, they're post-feasibility. They indicate we're able to surface the key ratios that the investors are looking for. So we put those before the investor community. We had over 60 financing institutions from across the globe, over 200 participants. So these are projects that are ready for investments, and that's what the President will be unveiling tomorrow. And remember that that's not the end. It's essentially the beginning of this process. So we're getting a second wave of projects. We continue to evaluate them, package them, and ensure that they come on stream and contribute towards the revitalization of the economy. And the important point to make here is just to restate the point I made earlier on. We want to free fiscals to focus on social infrastructure. We are packaging projects that are bankable, that can assist with the crowding in of private sector. We'll also be finalizing the operationalization of the infrastructure fund, which essentially is a blended financing mechanism. So with regards to the infrastructure fund, the state says we are de-risking the project, we are prepared to take the first loss, and in doing that we are going to crowd in private sector investment and ensure that we are able to resuscitate the economy, and then allow the fiscals to take care of social infrastructure, hospital infrastructure, schools, low-income housing, all of those projects, the programs that are necessary to improve the quality of lives, but that don't necessarily have an income stream. Let the fiscals take care of that, and let's engineer a new approach to ensure that those that are commercially viable, they do in fact get to land on the lap of the financiers, and we are able to ensure that we restart the economy.
Now, Dr. Ramokgopa, it's not the first time we've heard of projects along the similar lines as the one you're describing, promises of improved quality of life, of bankable projects. How on earth will we measure the effectiveness of such a project? I mean, what is the difference between this project and the others that we've learned of over the past few years, promising to improve the economy and better people's lives?
Oh, there are significant distinguishing characteristics. The first one is that how we package and prepare this project was with the private sector. So essentially we worked as a team. They invested in resources, some of the most eminent and distinguished professionals to help us to package this project. So that's the first distinguishing characteristics. And then the second one is that the majority of these projects are private sector sponsored. So private sector has demonstrated over a passage of time the capacity to deliver on major and complex projects. So essentially the delivery mechanism will be through the private sector. And then the third part that we are introducing now is a blended financing mechanism. So in instances where projects don't have a sufficient returns for investors, the state is able to invest in those projects, de-risk, take the first loss, and in that way you are able to make the returns attractive to the private sector. The fourth area that makes it different from the previous ones is that we are now imposing, if you like, localization requirements. So if you like, a designation of inputs that they must be locally produced. And then we're working with the DFIs to ensure that there's financing made available to allow for black players to play upstream of these projects, so that part of the effort is about intervening in relation to the production and ownership model, so the qualitative transformation of society. So we're tampering with the economic relations of society. And also, how you industrialize, it must happen in geographic spaces that are closer to where people are living. So the idea about the township economy, township revitalization, not small dorpies and towns. We have designed, for an example, part of the projects that we are doing is around surfacing of rural roads. So there's an imposition that the input material must come from those localities. So we have designed this over a period of 5 months. So I'm more than confident that once the president announces, you are going to see that they will turn the country into a big construction site. So we're more than buoyant about the prospects of this project pipeline.
Thank you so much for your time. There you have it, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, head of the investment infrastructure in the presidency, announcing the launch of a presidential sustainable infrastructure development symposium, which we'll learn more about from the president tomorrow.